You want to hear some dad jokes?
I do.
Why didn't Han Solo enjoy his steak dinner? It was
Why?
chewy.
Mm, mm,
I like the groan you did
yikes.
there. Why don't pirates take a bath before they walk the plank? They just wash up on shore.
mm, mm.
How many narcissists does it take to screw in a light bulb?
One,
One.
just me.
The narcissist holds the light bulb while the rest of the world revolves around him.
Nice. Nice.
Welcome back to the Working on the Dad Pod. I'm Alex. With me, as always, my co-host Ethan. And before we get started today we are talking about working on adult conversations. So those conversations you want to have with your friend, your partner, your neighbor, your spouse, but the kids are around and you don't know exactly how to navigate it. So we'll share some of our best tips, some advice that maybe we've seen online, some tactics that we want to try, all that good stuff. But while you're here, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Click that little bell so you can get notifications every time that we post a new video. We tend to record these on Thursdays and post them to YouTube right after, kind of if you're a night owl, or if you want them first thing Friday morning, they'll be there on YouTube. And then the next day we post them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Like and subscribe there. And please leave us a 5-star review if you can. Commenting, sharing, interacting in any meaningful way is a great way to spread the word, and we really appreciate it. With all that being said, Ethan, how are you today?
Hey, I'm all right, man. How are you?
It's, this today has been a heck of a week. That kind of week.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
we got quite a bit going on in the Bryant household. Been 2 weeks since we recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Last week, you guys listened to a bonus episode, but this week, past 2 weeks for me have been a little chaotic.
I feel that. Yeah, it's been chaotic too. Obviously, Alex mentioned last week we had the bonus episode. I took the girls who were on their spring break up to upstate New York, a solo daddy daughters trip to visit my grandmother who is 94, and
Nice.
and I was pretty nervous considering how it is the longest that I would have driven with them solo. Basically, I had never done longer than an hour with the
Yeah.
two of them, only because, like, if we were traveling more than an hour, it was usually a family thing, just in the car. That just happened
Sure.
to be how it is. And so this was 4 hours each way. For the most part, it was good. Just one stop in each direction because my 4-year-old had to go potty. And, I got pretty good at the straightaway on the highway, one hand here, foot on the pedal, reaching back like this to hand them stuff. And yeah, no, it wasn't bad. An extra inch or two in height would have been cool, but couldn't really make that happen,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I've got the move whenever I've got both kids and we're driving around. And sometimes that could be as much as like we've consolidated all of our curbside pickups into one day. And so we're hitting all the spots in one go
Mhm,
or something like that. Or it can be driving, those even
mhm.
hour long, hour and a half little day trips where maybe my wife has a day off. And I've perfected the system where I keep everything that I need for the kids on the front seat. And then the way the car's oriented, my daughter, the oldest, is sitting behind the passenger seat. So I can hand
Uh,
her stuff and go, hand that to your brother, right? I can hand it to her. She's in the front facing seat and I can go, hand that to your brother. Is your brother asleep? Right. I get her to tell me all that information so that we can
yeah.
sort of have a diagonal stream of communication
Mm.
versus having to manipulate with her back there, because I know in a lot of those cases, I'm setting up that drive for little man's nap anyway. So he's not going to need a ton of attention.
Interesting. So I had almost the exact same setup, except the older one was directly behind me, and the
Yeah.
younger one was the diagonal. Which
Yeah.
I mean, I was fine at just the hand back, like because
Yeah.
she faces forward too, so that wasn't a problem. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
It's the
Um,
ability to it's the ability to like have the brief eye contact when you need to. When you're on a
mhm.
straightaway and you're like, "Hey, what's going on?
Yeah,
You got this," like that kind of thing. Um,
no, I feel that.
so yeah, I think I'm glad it worked out though. Your road
Yeah,
trip.
yeah. I'll actually go into my win. It's short and sweet and kind of stinky. But my now 19-month-old, it's pretty funny. While we were on the trip, she developed a new trick where every time I fart, she goes, "I farted," as a 19-month-old would say. And anytime she hears any kind of loud fart, she goes, "I farted." And I came back home and said to my wife, "I can't wait to show you her new trick." And the first time I farted, and she went, "I farted." My wife gave me quite the look, and I was like, "I told you it was great, wasn't it?" And yeah,
That's a blessing. I mean,
it
honestly,
is.
it's
It's
a
the
blessing
best.
of blessings, really.
Yes.
Um,
And I
but did you
fart a
go?
lot, so it makes me laugh a lot.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
for us, the past couple weeks, we haven't had any big trips, but it feels like everybody's been a little bit sick, right? And that
Mm.
has culminated in today. My daughter got diagnosed with strep.
Ah.
And so that, always fun, right? She
Yeah.
they gave her they diagnosed her with a mild ear infection on Monday. So mild that, as we
Mm.
mentioned before, we did not do the antibiotics thing.
Sure.
It felt like it was clearing up. And then yesterday afternoon, after my mother-in-law picked her up from school, her fever got high enough. Like on Monday, we had essentially gotten a note from school that was like, her fever's 99.3. What do you want to do? And we're like, check again in 20 minutes, see if it's climbing. And it was 99.7. And so we like pulled the trigger because if we brought her home before it hit 100, we could send her back the next day if it never hit
Yeah.
100. But
Yeah.
if they recorded at 100, then it's, locked in. She's missing Tuesday. And so we got the
Right.
diagnosis of a mild ear infection, didn't do anything. And then yesterday, she pops the fever. Today, we take her in. She's got strep throat. And it has been quite the journey of having a kid sick at home. But
Hmm.
my win loss is not the fact that my daughter got sick and my son's been teething his back molars, which are always the toughest, and like all that. But I think somewhere, and this is going to bleed into our conversation about having things kids around. I think there are things that me and my wife have been saying over the past couple of days with having my daughter home quite a bit with us, that have maybe made her feel like her presence is not welcome with open arms in every
Hmm.
circumstance and situation. And
Hmm.
that maybe it
Hmm.
is not the easiest thing for our day to day to have her there. And part of
Yeah.
the issue that we have is that she has, on quite a number of occasions, claimed to not be feeling well,
Hmm.
wanting it to be grounds to stay home from school. And I think this
Right.
has come from times where she is actually sick and mom gets takeout, right? And she's like, mom's
Hmm.
getting takeout, and like, or mom takes me to the beach, when I'm sick or stuff like that, where it's just like, no, we want you to be outside getting some salt air because that could be good for you. And you can stay
Right.
away from other people on a weekday afternoon at the beach. It's pretty easy. And we got takeout because taking you to the doctor like ruined my chance to prepare myself some lunch, and I'm starving and it's 2:15 and I just needed to eat something as fast as possible. But she's kind of
Right.
mistaking that for we're going to have a fun day, right?
Right.
Because we're not trying to make it seem bad. So what we've had to do is, when she stays home, when she is running a fever, we've decided on a no screen time policy all day,
Mm.
and that's tough, like it's pretty tough to have a no screen time policy with a 5-year-old. But the idea is like, this kid can read, by herself books, right? I'm
Hmm.
like, you've got toys upon toys, building materials, craft materials, all sorts of things that she can access. And so that's been the idea, is that we don't want to encourage her to try and feign sick to get out of going to school or get out of being at school, as is usually the case. So that led to her tonight. We're getting to bedtime, and she goes, I want to get ready for bed. And I'm like, well, great. That's what the timer that just went off was for. It's time to get ready for bed. And she's like, no, but like, I want to do it all myself. And I want to get my brother ready. And I want you guys to rest. And I'm like, okay. She's like, brushing teeth, flossing, the mouthwash, getting our PJs on, change his diaper. I want to do all of it. And you guys rest. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Is she capable of successfully changing a diaper? Does she get it tight enough and everything?
We don't ask her too much, right? It hasn't been like she knows the process. And the thing is, big man's got enough coordination. He can help her out. He's not a newborn, and he's getting towards the end of that. We're starting to see some progress on the potty front, but still, like, he needs a nighttime diaper and will for probably a couple years. But anyway, she like wants to do this, and I'm like, okay, this is great. And my wife and I sit in the living room, and we're just like, how long do we give them? She like closes the door to their room and everything, like gonna put him in PJs, change his diaper, and we're sort of watching on the monitor. And eventually we have to intervene, because it's taking her forever to get this diaper on, and he's gonna start getting frustrated. And so we start to help her, and then it could not have gone downhill. I had a nice 10 minutes just scrolling through Twitter. Like, I could have been doing chores. And I was like, no, she said, relax. I got to follow the rules. Right. And I could have had this nice, relaxing time. And then all of a sudden she comes back with, I wanted you to rest. And it's like, it's okay. I rested. And the tornado that ensued from her body and her emotions is something that I'm not sure she's ever topped. In terms of, she was just physically sobbing, like whole heaving her body for like 5-10 minutes, ended up delaying bedtime by probably 20 overall, because she just could not get it together. She wanted to argue. And of course, little man is doing no favors, because what happened was my wife helped get the diaper on. She ended up getting the PJs on. Everybody was real proud. The PJs are good. But then it comes time to brush teeth. And little man doesn't want to brush teeth, because he's been having mouth pain, because he's been teething, and he's got a negative association with brushing teeth right now. And we're having to be a little bit more forcing his mouth open and brushing the teeth for him without him consenting as much as I would like him to on the opening the mouth portion of it. Right. And so she's like, hey, let's brush teeth. And he's like, no. And she goes, no. Listen. I just want to brush your teeth. No. Okay, but you have to just let me say the whole thing. Just let me say the whole thing, and then you decide. So I'm going to brush your teeth. No. And they did that a dozen times, where he would just cut her off, peak little brother energy going on. And she just eventually, you're not letting me finish. You're not letting me talk. You're not. I'm like, you are throwing some logic at him like he owes you a fair shot. This is a 2-year-old. You're yelling at a 2-year-old about how like frustrated you are that he's not letting you talk. And I was glad I was not on bedtime tonight. Let's just put it that way. She couldn't get her act together, so I walked out and set up my laptop and started getting ready for this.
Yeah, our 4.5-year-old had a almost identical night 2 nights ago. Yeah, that was excellent. So I feel you. Yeah. Well, as Alex mentioned, tonight's topic is talking about having adult conversations around your kid. I want to start by saying I do not always follow my own rules to the best of my ability, and I am, sometimes it's not necessarily saying bad things. It is just simply, sometimes it's coding stuff we don't really want them to repeat. And sometimes it's actually changing the way we would normally talk to one another so that we only have one that's really talking, so that the older one can actually kind of participate in the discussion. But for the most part, I do want to say I try to avoid, my wife and I try to avoid negative conversations or arguments with each other in front of our kids. I
Yeah.
try not to badmouth relatives or people they see a lot in front of them. I can't say I'm perfect, but for the most part, it's more of just like I don't always code correctly, and I'm not always as inclusive as I want to be.
Right. I think for the purposes of the conversation, defining what we're trying to hide, right? I think it's such a conditional how we respond on stuff, right? There are things you mentioned, the negativity, and I think just avoiding having those conversations, keeping them calm. Sometimes I've heard people having like code words of like, I really want to discuss this later. Like they might say
Mm,
orange juice completely out of context, and that's your code word that, okay, Panama, whatever your word is there. But other times you might be wanting to keep the information from the kid, not, as you mentioned, because of not wanting to repeat it, because maybe you want to use bad words, or you're talking about something that's maybe like political or just whatever that you don't need them to be talking about. But then I think there's the like sometimes you want to hide the information from them. Like sometimes you're
hmm
just trying to logistically plan and you want to know if like a park is feasible, right? And
Right.
you don't want to say the word park because it's like saying the word walk in front of a dog,
Yeah.
and you just want to, and so you're having to like sit there and and our old system for that, right? So like for that specific use case, our old system used to be spelling.
hmm
And a couple of weeks ago, a couple months ago probably now, my wife was basically saying, because my wife likes to do this thing where she'll go take a bath. She'll do like 15, 20 minutes. I watch the kids. Maybe I'm washing some dishes or something. And then after 15 or 20 minutes of her time, I can let the kids in. Right. And then I can have some sort of free time to continue, choresing or relaxing, kicking back, whatever I want to do for about 15 or 20 minutes. And she goes, would you mind if I went and took a BATH? And my daughter just goes, a bath. Like, well, that system shot the heck.
Yep.
So now we've had to, ever since that moment, we've had to very creatively stop spelling things, but come up with alternative secret names for them, or use like, similes, metaphors, whatever, to, come up with some sort of comparison. I guess we'd use synonyms, but like a you know, high English synonyms, so that, would you like to go to the recreational activity enclosure instead of the
Yes.
park, right?
Right.
And things like that. Or our local park is by the Kiwanis Club. And so I call it the K Club. And the kids haven't figured out what the K Club is, but if I said Kiwanis, they'd be all over that as the playground. I was
Mm.
like, what are your thoughts on K Club? And my wife will always take a second. And this is the problem, where I'm like, half the time, our language that I feel like we've agreed upon,
Is forgotten.
she sits there and she goes, and I'm like, I don't
You
know.
know
I'll just
what?
text you. I'll just text
I'm
you.
talking about yeah. I'm just talking about the effing park right now. All right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like I want to ask it while the kid's freaking out, because I could take them there and get them out of your hair, whatever. But I think that's sort of, always the stepping around those conversations
Yeah.
that you need to have in that moment, because you're trying to logistically plan for right then, the next day, whenever, trying to get some semblance of what's going on. But you don't want the kids interjecting their opinion, because it's like, yeah, I was thinking about ice cream, but maybe you took the kids out for cookies in the
hmm
morning when I was running errands or playing golf or whatever I was doing. It's like maybe you already did something like that, but I don't want to say the words ice cream, and I don't want the kids to interject their opinion, because I know exactly what their opinion on ice cream is. But then I think there's those
Hey,
other yeah.
I was just gonna joke, say they hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think
You
you
didn't
have
want yeah.
those other conversations, and those are the ones where the conversations that are like, we need to have a serious talk, right? Not just a
Yeah.
talk where I'm trying to avoid certain code words and setting you off. Like conversations where like I don't know if this topic is for you, either because I don't want you repeating the information, or on sometimes some levels. You had mentioned when we were scoping out this episode the idea of like current events, where it's just like
Yeah.
sometimes I don't want to talk about those kind of things simply because I don't want to have to explain all the backstory. Like if
Right.
I want to
And
sit there and talk about Donald Trump or Joe Biden, to use two very well known examples of people that get talked about a lot at dinner tables, it's like I don't want to have to explain to my daughter, like, not just who the president is. Maybe this was a terrible example, but like all the backstory of if I
yeah,
mention one
sure.
of the news articles that they're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and I brought that up because yes, there are certain current events, I don't really want to talk about in front of a 4.5-year-old. But
Sure.
sometimes it's like I'm eating my food. Like I don't want to like stop and like give myself a note to ask my wife about something later. And sometimes you just want to say like, oh, like did you happen to see this thing? Like I think a safe example here would just be um, sports. Not that I don't like want to talk about sports in front of my kid, but like if I say something like, "Oh, did you hear about what happened in this game?" and she's not that into sports, but if I like tell her something cool happened, she'll usually understand it.
Yeah.
And sometimes if like my daughter wants more questions, I end up spending like an additional 10 minutes trying to explain like the 30-second thing I wanted to tell my wife. And then at the end of it, it was so boring hearing me explain it. She doesn't find it cool. And it was like the whole thing was like just a waste of everybody's time because
Yeah.
I know if I asked my daughter, like, and I've done this before, like 2 minutes later, it's like, what's the story daddy just told you about basketball? I don't know. And it's like,
Right.
cool. Good
Right.
stuff. Yeah,
And
no,
I
that
mean,
was
it's
great. Yeah.
really moral of the story, end of episode, kids kill your storytelling vibe. Yeah. I agree with that. That I think the explaining things, but I think one area that I really want to get better at, right, is when you're having these adult conversations. And this is a tactic because I think there have been some times, yesterday was a prime example of this. Yesterday evening, my wife and I, as I've already mentioned, my daughter is sick. She had a
Mm-hmm.
fever. We took her to the doctor today. We didn't know about the strep until today, but we knew she wasn't going to school because she had the fever. And so we were trying to game plan what we wanted to do about school then, or about the workday, just go through our calendars. When are our meetings? When can we cover what? All that good stuff. And we went into our bedroom to have the conversation, not locking the door or anything, but our daughter came in there. Right. And so we try a lot of times to sort of separate ourselves and go somewhere else. And we do have these opportunities now with a 2 year old and a 5 year old that like, and being in Florida where we have an outdoor space that we can utilize most of the year, it's like we can tell the kids sometimes, hey, you guys want to go jump on the trampoline? And they both go jump on the
Mm-hmm.
trampoline and they're 20 feet away playing happily. We can see them, but they can't hear a word we're saying. Right.
Right.
And we try to set those up. But like last night, we're in the bedroom trying to have the conversation. And with my daughter, at least, she's old enough where it took her a minute, but we can coax her out and say, hey, we need to have this conversation. We'll be with you shortly, but we need to be alone. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a conversation you can be a part of. Right. Because
Right.
we don't want her to interject her opinion of like, no, you're not going to dance tomorrow, but I want to go to
Mm-hmm.
dance. No, you're not going to the Y, in the morning with
Right.
dad. But I want to, it's just like, okay, we get that. You're just not, and I don't feel like having that
Yeah.
battle with you, but trying to pull aside. And that is leading me to like a tip that I found that I think part of the issue for kids sometimes is they feel like when the adults are talking, it's never going to stop, and they never have a chance, and they're never going to be heard, and they're never going to be noticed. And this is something that I noticed happened in Bluey. It was an episode I was watching, and I also saw this I think it was somebody's Medium post, but that they also do this tactic, that they've coached up their kids essentially when they're having a one-on-one conversation with another adult, whether that's a friend, spouse, doesn't matter. The kid can come and put their hand on the parent's arm, just like that, while the parent's talking, and then you would then put your hand over top of their hand as a signal, silent signal of message received. I know that you need me. I'm keeping talking to this adult. Done. Okay, what did you need? Right. And you turn off to the side like that. Sorry if that's bad audio for anyone, but you turn off to the side and then address your kid. But it creates this thing instead of dad, 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 mom, mom, mom. You're not. And then what?
Yeah.
Stops that whole dynamic. I haven't tried it yet, but I want to.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to that episode of Bluey yet. News in our household, we've started watching Bluey, but we do not do new episodes unless all four of us are watching together because my wife and I really like it. So
that's not surprising.
So yeah, it's man, I was telling her that you omitted Bandit from the dad draft, and she's disappointed in you. Like, I get a pass. Yeah.
No, I mean, like, I will say I was newer into the Blueyverse. It wasn't it was a sometimes watch, not an all the time watch. And now it's like my daughter's go-to and has been for, probably 5-6 months, which may include the dad draft, but I'm just going to stick with the story that like he was not as well known of a character in our house, and I hadn't been watching as much. And then I think she started watching, and then it became a thing of like I'd catch the bits and pieces of it, and then I started hearing more and more dads actually like this, and I was like, let me watch this. And then I'm like, oh, I get that. Oh, this is awesome.
Yep. He is such a good dad. It's like it's almost like it's kind of like a false idol. It's impossible to be that good. Like they're setting the bar too high, and
they're setting the bar too high. I mean, there are some episodes where they let things go unrealistically far.
Oh yeah, like the episode on the magic, it's like early first season. The magic something where like you can make it freeze. And basically, he spends the whole afternoon well into the night, like shooting water in it, like waterboarding himself because they keep going freeze, freeze, freeze. I don't. It's like
that one. There's another episode, and I won't describe it since this is. I know how you are with spoilers, but there's another episode where like the kids do something similar where it's a situation where the kids have control. And the parents just let it go. And maybe I'm not narrowing it down enough, but parents just let it go way too far for my taste. It ends up working out because of course, and because it's animation. And so people can control the outcome very easily, but anyway.
Oh yeah, no, good show though. But so what I was saying was, I definitely am going to try that. That sounds good because my older daughter is terrible about being patient, and I'll even like stop what I'm doing, and like if you and I are talking, I'll say, "Hey, I am talking to Alex right now. And I will let you know when I can answer you," and it'll just be, "Hey, Daddy. Hey, Daddy. Hey, Daddy. Daddy," and I'll be like, "Please, I hear you. I just need another minute." And then eventually it's just like, "Fine, what do you want?" "Okay, well, that wasn't worth like interrupting me, so the answer is now no." So, which is like also not good, but it's kind of like it's never anything that actually would require her to continuously interrupt me. Whereas the times that she does listen to me, And I say, what did you want? And it's like, oh, like my sister fell. And it's like, okay, so that's the thing. Like you should have pressed me on. Like we gotta
Yeah,
reverse.
you got to be like sister fell as your
Yeah,
opening thing. Like stop
yeah,
wasting time with the hey daddies.
yeah,
But
right.
also know that like can I have some milk right now needs to not
Right.
even be a hey daddy, it needs to wait until I'm
Yeah,
done, right? Like
yeah,
I and then
exactly.
obviously that's part of like our job as parents, right? At the
Sure.
end of the day, I'm sitting there going, somebody needs to teach these kids appropriate conversational behavior, but that's the thing, and it's doing it patiently, right? And one thing that I've noticed when having conversations is like we tried to really work on getting my daughter to take turns. She's
Right.
very much like, but it's become almost too regimented to her, where it's like no one can ever be interrupted ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like any interruption is bad and needs to be called out and needs to be reprimanded. And the problem is she's very transparent in
Mm.
situations like tonight when she's having a meltdown or when she's trying to argue and get her way. She basically has a tactic of maybe you didn't hear me, so let me just say the same thing again. But then she gets mad if you cut her off because you know exactly what she's about to say. I wasn't finished. And I'm like, you were going to say, no, I was going to say exactly the thing I was in the middle of saying. The answer's
Yeah,
still no.
they're smarter than us. That's the problem. they
They,
they know our
they,
moves because they
yeah.
literally have been created from our moves. And
Yeah, but they're not. But this isn't her being smarter. This is me knowing what she's going to say. Her arguing with me, telling me that it's not going to be that, and then saying the thing that I thought it was going to be anyway.
well,
Right? She's just being
that's
wrong
the beauty
multiple
of the
times.
that's the switcheroo though, because she's telling you you don't know what she's gonna say until
Oh, she
you.
did. She got me. She
Yeah, she
got
got you.
me. So
She
yeah,
got you. Yeah.
interesting. But I think on that note, it's like she with all these tactics and things, it's trying to teach her that nuance. But it one of the toughest things I feel I don't want to say one of the toughest, but it feels like a very tough thing to teach because usually when they are breaking these social constructs of how a conversation is supposed to go, what everybody sort of deems, it's pretty
Right.
annoying and frustrating that someone is like breaking that social pact and like interrupting you or not being patient or not waiting their turn or not taking the social cues. And so it's I think one of the harder things to like appropriately respond and be like, "Hey, I'm in the middle of talking. The right thing for you to do, derailing my entire train of thought of the thing that I was actually saying to the person that I
Mm.
really wanted to be talking to at that particular moment. Yes. So you need to get my attention, wait, blah, blah, blah. What was I saying? I don't remember. Well, it was probably great. Probably a great sports story, but that ruined it.
Right. Exactly. Well, I'm actually proud of us. I did not know we'd get a good like 25 minutes out of this topic.
We only
Um,
got 20. Let's be honest. We took a while on story time.
okay, that's fair.
That's
That's
okay.
fair.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's a solid little episode. I don't have a lot else to talk about with it because
No,
it's just
I
conversations.
think
But I think if you guys have any like tips in the comments of like things you do around all of this,
yeah,
because right, this is not like some like, oh, in this particular circumstance. It's just like
yeah.
having adult conversations around your
Uh,
kids. It's weird.
or like helping train patients without getting angry. That'd be great. That's something I
Yeah,
could
I
use.
mean, I kind of know the answer. It's just respond differently, take a breath, take a beat, but it's actually
Easier
putting
said
it
than
into
done.
practice in the moment. I mean,
Yeah,
it works and she's learning and people figure it out and we're not the only ones that can teach them. And that's sort of the other thing. Like some of these societal norms and cues come from society and like our kids are in school, they're around other adults, other kids. They sort of figure this out like, hey, I don't like being around the kid that interrupts me all the time, so maybe I shouldn't interrupt other people.
true,
Hmm.
true.
Anyway,
Yeah.
let's
Shall we share our dad bodices.
Yeah, I got I got a
Yeah.
I got a
Well,
heck of a couple
well,
weeks.
yeah. Well, I will let. So I don't have anything. I don't have anything good to say. So I'll just I'll just go first because everybody's probably curious. Your birthday came and went, so everybody wants to know if you hit your goal. But what I will say is, when you and I last recorded 2 weeks ago, I was 195.2. I traveled last Thursday, so I weighed myself Wednesday night, and I was 192.3. So I had lost 3 pounds, and I was like, oh man, that's awesome. Today I was 194.6.
Ooh.
I did have a bigger dinner than I was planning to before weigh in. So
Mm,
I don't know if there was just like fresh poundage that had yet to digest, but I'm not going to blame it on that. But I'm still not where I want to be. I will say I did not exercise as much as I wanted to this week because um, I had a few things come up. I had a doctor's appointment. The girls were both home on Monday because of the last day of their spring break. So, and then Tuesday I had a doctor's appointment. Yesterday I was at the office. I
yeah.
did go jogging today. It was cut a little bit short because it started raining beyond the point of my tolerance. It was only cut like a quarter of a mile, but that's still something.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I've been doing better with regard to not bored eating, my intuitive eating. There has now been like multiple meals in the last 2 weeks where I have said, you know what, I think I'm full and stopped eating, which is like not something I'm great at doing. In fact, I did not do that tonight, but I didn't have that moment where I thought that because I didn't
Yeah,
really eat
that's fair.
much all day. So, um, anywho, I'm not where I want to be, but we all got to know. Did you get there?
Not even close. So
Ah, okay,
here's what happened.
okay,
So probably about a month ago at this point, I started noticing I usually wear these headphones for work. I'm on a lot of video chats during work, and sometimes I'll take one off or do this, gets a little sweaty, or I might just need to scratch something, whatever. And as I move my headphones, for those of you listening only, I have over the ear headphones and I adjust them off of one ear. And I noticed a couple weeks ago that when I would remove my right ear and was only listening through my left ear, things started sounding fuzzy. This led me on, a couple weeks of going, okay, my ear kind of feels like it's a little clogged up. I don't know what's going on, yada, yada, yada. Eventually, spring break on our vacation, I'm doing deadlifts in a Tampa YMCA and my equilibrium goes all out and I have to sit down because balance. So I go to the ENT, ear, nose, throat, and they tell me basically they think this is usually the cause of an infection of the auditory nerve. And so the prescription is prednisone. And if anybody knows anything about prednisone, it's a corticosteroid. And I had to take a 15-day cycle of it. Well, I start this sucker. I was maybe 1.5, 2 pounds away from my goal weight a week and a half before my birthday. Well, then I go to the doctor on Monday and I take this prednisone. I start taking this prednisone immediately, and it's a high dose of this stuff. This thing makes me gain weight and bloat and collect water like nothing. Between the Thursday that I weighed in a week and a half before my birthday, where I think I was like 182 even or whatever it was, and the Saturday of my birthday, a week and a half later, I gained 12 pounds. So I weighed in at like 194 on the scale in the thing. And I'm like, mathematically, I could not have eaten whatever that is, 42,000 calories over my maintenance. I'm like, that's clearly not like I messed up my diet kind of
is,
weight. I'm already
is
5
that
pounds lighter than I was.
okay? Okay,
Like the water's gone away, it also did like mess up my appetite in like a negative way of like I felt
Uh,
insatiable at some points. I tried to control it, but it was Easter slash my birthday, and like there was a lot
yeah.
of food around and like some extra drinks and things like that. And I'm sure I was not my most healthy self. But
Mhm.
once I started bloating up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I already had the appointment reserved to go do the body scan thing. And I went and
Mm.
did it anyway. And I weighed in at 194 or whatever. And like my metrics felt all over the place. But the good news I got out of it is I got a really high baseline. So if I go back, I found out the scan's only like $25 because it's not one of those DEXA scans or a water displacement scan. It's essentially just like a commercial version of the stand here and sends
Mhm.
electrical stuff. So I measured myself, even though I knew the number was going to be not a great number. I measured myself on my home scale right before I went, and then so I could compare it. And I think I'm going to go back one more time and then have two data points, go back 3, 6 months, whatever, see where my progress is, but compare it scale to scale. And then if the numbers are this, because the numbers were pretty close, but if the numbers are close again, then I'm like, this thing doesn't do anything more than my $40 Amazon scale. And I'm
Right.
not going to go back,
Right.
because like to go get a DEXA scan is like an hour away. Like the closest DEXA
Right.
place to me happens to be. And so I'm like,
Mm.
if I wanted to do something different like that, maybe I would do that annually or make a special trip for that if I felt like I needed the data,
Yeah.
right? I'm like,
Right.
as long as I am sure that my scale is showing the right trend lines, the difference between it saying 180 pounds and 179 pounds and that being accurate is not
Right.
actually material to me. Same with any body fat percentage numbers, other than the vanity of it saying in the 20s or saying in the teens, right? And this is the thing that killed me. Like, and what I have problems with, I know why, like the electrical impulses, the whatever that scientific terminology is for sending the electrical impulses through to get all the readings. I know they're bogus because I was sitting at like 19% body fat according to my home scale when I weighed 182 pounds. And then by Saturday, I was at 26% body fat. And I'm just like, I'm starting to think that all this tissue and salt and water is maybe not the best thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's my story of how I epically failed. I don't want to say it's not my fault, but like I threw the goal out the window as soon as started taking the prednisone and
So
googled the words prednisone belly, because I just felt like no matter how little I ate, I had indigestion like nobody's business, and just felt
well,
like
that sucks. Did they is there any way to figure out what caused the infection in the first place?
Um, yeah, so there are a couple of theories on what caused the infection in the first place. Usually the most common cause is some form of coronavirus, and it does not have to be COVID-19, but like
Right.
the
Right.
common
Sure.
cold is a coronavirus, but
Yep.
something like that. So it could have been asymptomatic
Mm.
COVID. It could have been any number of things that the kids brought home that are
Yes.
a coronavirus in structure. Um, at least that's what was told to me by the physician's assistant,
Right.
is usually the cause, an asymptomatic cold or even a symptomatic cold and like sinus pressure, and then like the nerve just gets affected. And so I think by the next time we record, if not a couple weeks, I'll have like retested and stuff. But definitely felt like an old man when they tested me, because they gave me a hearing test, and they tested my left ear versus my right ear to confirm that I wasn't hearing as well out of my left ear. And they're like, yeah, you're not. But also your right ear can't hear that well. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, excuse me? I heard you, but
Yeah. I
like,
just want
what do you mean?
clarification.
What do you mean I can't hear? And
Yeah.
they're like, you'd be a good candidate for hearing aids. And I'm like, I'm turning
Uh,
35. I am feeling
yeah.
old right this second.
Yeah. My
So that was a little rough. And I'm like, I have no idea if I'm actually going to act on that, but um,
yeah. My you know this, but my wife, when she was pregnant with our first, um, had a equilibrium issue where they did the hearing test, the balance test. They like tested her for vertigo, but it was like at one point she was like hearing like a ring, and then at some points it was just like she'd sneeze, and then the next thing you know, like she's like holding my hand because like we're in bed and she's like afraid she's gonna fall. And it's like all this stuff. And like sometimes they're just like, sometimes pregnancy does weird things to your body, and you're just like, that one should be like, common side effects of sperm can be any of these things, So
yeah, it's chaos, but yeah. I once I get off the prednisone, I'll probably recalibrate, maybe make some new goals, but I don't have that hard and fast. Like I had, some high hopes for this body scan thing and the day of doing it. So that it was sort of the impetus for that goal was not just, it was the freedom to go get that body scan, plus also being my birthday, plus turning a year older. But once I get off the prednisone, I'm going to sort of set a baseline to see, how much body fat did I actually gain? What's my weight now? I think I weighed today. And like I said, I had already dropped probably about 5 of those pounds. I was 189. So I would expect some of it to be coming up. But as a plus side, I've still been able to work out, and being on the prednisone has helped my balance when I'm lifting heavy. And when you gain a lot of water weight, it doesn't look good unless you do an upper body workout and you get a pump, and then you kind of look like Captain America, and it's pretty baller. And I'm like, it's pretty cool. Like it's not chemically the same. Corticosteroid is not chemically the same thing at all as an antibiotic steroid, but like for 5 minutes, it feels that way.
There you go. Yeah. Well, on that note, I want to thank everybody for working on the Dad Pod with us. Remember, please like, subscribe, comment, recommend us to your friends. Recommend us to random people who are going to be, spending 72 hours with their parents that they don't happen to have that great of a relationship.
Your challenge for this week is to recommend it to every cashier that you interact with. Just every cashier. You have to talk to them. Say, listen to Working on the Dad Pod, wherever you get your podcast, or on YouTube.
Do it. Yeah. Watch us on YouTube. See this face. See that water-weighted face.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.